Hello, kind-hearted people of Earth and beyond. Welcome to the Kindness Rising podcast, the podcast that aims to inspire people to lead lives that flourish, grounded in kindness. My name is Brandon Blanks. I'm a writer and a stand-up comedian. I'm also the producer and co-host of this show. As always, the Kindness Rising podcast is brought to you by Kindness Rising. Kindness Rising is a community organization committed to inspiring, equipping, and resourcing people to lead lives that flourish, grounded in kindness, and aimed at making the world a better place. For more information, please visit our website at kindnessrising.community. There you can find out about our upcoming events, how to get involved. You can sign up for our newsletter, find out more information about this podcast, or even donate. Kindness Rising is supported solely by the generous contribution of our lovely donors. So if you would like to help support us, please go to kindnessrising.community/donate. Thank you so much for tuning in and enjoy this episode of the Kindness Rising podcast.
All right, welcome to the Kindness Rising podcast. This is Keith Page. I'm here with Brandon Blanks.
How you guys doing?
Hey, Brandon. I'm sure excited about our guests. We've got Patrick Moran on the phone. Patrick.
Hello.
Welcome to
Thanks for having me.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I've been listening, and it's I don't know what I did to deserve this, but it's amazing. Thank you.
Well, you and I have a fun history. You want to tell people how we met, how you found me?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I moved to Orange County in 2014, and I grew up in Christian evangelical tradition. I'm a pastor's kid, and was looking for something different, something that, I think, looking at the same time that you were looking and starting, Acclaimed at the time, read an article about what you were doing and checked you out, and wanted first to make sure you weren't a cult leader, and then because it just sounded like too good,
Right.
And then we were involved for a couple of years with Acclaimed, and it was amazing, and I so appreciate that being available. It's very fortunate that it was available during that time.
Yeah.
And then in the last couple of years we were in Orange County, our paths diverged a little bit. I had started to focus on some other things around, career and family business and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But we've kept in touch, and you've become a real mentor and peer and big brother to me, and I really appreciate that.
Well, from the day that you and Myra showed up and then kept coming to Reclaimed was really fun. And then getting to know you and watch you guys, just do real life together, and as a mom and dad, and then us spending time together, and then breaking some bread together, and just, through this kind of season of life, you caught me at a cool time where Reclaimed was fun for me. As you know, it was definitely an outside of the box expression of ministry at the time. And now fast forward a bunch of years, and you've got some other cool stuff. You don't even live in the same area. Otherwise we'd have you sitting right here with us. We have to have you on the phone. And so when Brandon and I started making our list, started the idea of a podcast, and started running down the list of people, and you came to mind, and I just thought, and you've turned me on to a couple podcasts that you thought I should check out. And then in thinking about all you've done, and I've told Brandon a bit about you, and we thought, well, number one, it's just I've never heard a bunch of your story in one cool long sitting, and not that we'll have time to get into probably all your story, because as we said before we turned on the record button, that you've got a lot, but we'll have fun no matter where we go, and then I want to talk about what you're doing now. And then I also want to talk about an idea you brought up of just where does kindness fit into this, especially the world you live and operate in, which we'll get people talking about. So your background, I know, is in the video game space, but back me up to, as a kid, when do you first start taking an interest in what becomes what we know now as video gaming, and that is a career path? Get us started on Patrick as a little guy.
Oh, yeah. So I grew up in a pastor's kid, and the tradition that we grew up in was pretty, what I would consider hellfire and brimstone, pretty intense. Let's put it that way. And I think that my way of coping with that particularly as I became a teenager and was expected to play a role in my father's employment, by virtue of being involved. And I was there sleeping on the pews every night and there almost every day of the weekend, and didn't have a lot of space for childhood. And we moved a lot, so it made connecting with friends very challenging.
Sure.
I developed great friends, and then we'd move, and then that would happen over and over again. Probably similar to what military kids go through.
Right. That's what I was just thinking about. Yeah.
And so my escape was video games, and I discovered that, with the Atari 2600 coming out. But I think the real moment for me was I found a game, SimCity, on a Tandy 1000 computer. And it's the original one where these like blocks. And I remember plopping down these city zones and watching the city come to life and the traffic coming to life. And there was a whole world being simulated inside a video game. And it just blew my mind.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't a character jumping around a level. It was a whole world being simulated. And very shortly after that, discovered a game called Civilization, in which you rechart the course of human history over thousands of years. And just like really, it really opened my mind to what was possible. And then I got into all the other things with the Nintendo coming out and all the advances there. And then got into pen and paper gaming, but never at any point did I think I could be paid to do these things. I don't know where I thought these things come from.
Right.
Just like Santa's factory, maybe. I don't know. It was just such a...
Aliens.
The idea that people were making this was really far-fetched for me. And I was never a great student, but I was really self-motivated, and I really took to computer programming and self-taught myself computer programming, and was hired in high school to work as an engineer. So I was a senior in high school and was working 20, 30 hours a week as a computer engineer before I even got to college.
What year was that?
That would have been actually in 1999.
Okay, so yeah, a little, because I guess programming is so. You must have been one of the only kids that was programming in high school back then. Or not one of the only, but nowadays it's so commonplace, and it's like promoted as like a path that people should take. Whereas that was not the case, I assume, in the late 90s.
No, it was not. I was fortunate to go to a high school that had an actual computer lab.
Nice.
But people took it like they would take algebra, just checking a box, like they had to take it.
Yeah.
And I got like the moment I was shown, Hello World, which is your typical first
Hello
tutorial.
World, yeah.
Yeah. From that moment, I was just hooked. The idea that I could sit down and author whatever my mind could think up was really intoxicating for me.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I think partly is that I was born in Venezuela in the missionary field. We lived in Texas. We lived in Western Canada. And so it was like the world of computers was the one thing that I could understand, because I was very out of touch culturally with wherever I was living. It was, when we came back from Venezuela as a missionary kid, I think I was 8 at the time. My parents were coming back home, but I was leaving the country I had been born in.
Oh, true. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was having like a move across the world kind of experience where my parents were relaxing, back into the kind of culture they grew up in.
Right. What they were familiar with, and for you, it was all new. There was nothing familiar, right?
Yeah. And I remember we first lived in Corsicana, Texas, which is this little town outside of Dallas, and I was fluent in Spanish, and my skin, I'm Caucasian ethnically, but I had spent so much time outside near the equator. I had pretty dark skin at the time, just suntan, and they didn't know what to do with me, so they stuck me in like the special needs classroom.
Is that right?
So it's like behavioral issues, kids on the spectrum, just kids that are harder to handle. They didn't know what to do with at the time. And I remember I was at an international private school in Venezuela, and then ended up, in the rural Texas in this special needs classroom, and just could not. As a kid, I had no idea what was happening.
Yeah,
But anyways,
that would be really unsettling to go from that one space you just described, Venezuela, to this rural classroom where you're with the special needs and fish out of water.
It was crazy. Yeah.
Huh.
Anyhow,
Okay.
so that's, video games for me, I think, started as escapism and a recluse. But what I now understand is that video games are a phenomenal social development tool, coping tool, reasoning, logic tool. Like, they are a great developmental aid in general. And more are being used to help kids build their mental reasoning and thinking and create new ways of having them interact socially where they otherwise struggle. So it ended up being one of the best things I could have done, but it was all by accident.
Right.
It's really fortuitous timing.
Wow.
Well, also, you mentioned the moving around a lot, and what's cool about a video game is it's this world that no matter where you're at, you can access it, and there's sort of it's always with you in a kind of, it's like nowhere and everywhere at the same time, which is kind of, I never thought about that. It's like a home that it can be permanent because you can always kind of log back on. That's kind of interesting.
You can now. Back in the day, it was all handed around on floppy disks. So there was this you connect, you would connect with other socially awkward kids at school over video games, and then there's this whole you got a floppy that had files copied from someone else's floppy that had files copied from someone else's floppy. And
awesome.
You'd get these 5th, 6th, 7th generation hand-me-down discs of, hey, check out this new game, or try. So there's really they're very much like a kid's social scene and economy that around all of gaming at that time that was all physical.
That's cool.
It was pretty interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it literally, it had to be handed to you on a floppy from somebody else who had copied it, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And part of, I don't remember if you remember, back when music was on cassette tapes,
sure. Mm-hmm.
But there were so many albums that I heard for the first time that were like a bootleg.
Right.
Of, someone had copied the album to a cassette tape, and I got a copy, and that was the first time I heard this punk band, or that was the first time I heard Smashing Pumpkins or Pearl Jam, or it was through these bootleg cassette tapes that got handed around. So really, I liken it a lot to that.
Yeah.
There's like a mythology that's like a really magical thing, that you could only hear about this thing if it was physically given to you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's. I feel like that's sort of what the internet. I was talking to someone about torrents the other day and how it was kind of fun. It's it was it was easy to torrent stuff, but there was sort of a barrier. So it felt more like a treasure hunt than nowadays, where everything is so easy. You almost felt cool, like you were hacking and stealing something, or there's I think kids have lost. You know what I mean? There's sort of fun in it because it's you couldn't access everything wasn't at your fingertips. You kind of had to search a little more, and then if you found it, it was it was lucky. Where now it's everything you'd ever need is on YouTube, whatever. But
Wow. So also, while you're growing up in this Christian culture and you're doing you're playing games, was there any pushback either from family about that, or you're in your own head? Do kids go, what does God think of video games?
There definitely was. My parents were concerned, particularly my mother, that I was addicted to video games, that I was spending too much time with them. This idea that they were not useful was pretty pervasive. And certainly I had some physical role-playing game kind of stuff, that there was a whole satanic panic happening around that time around Dungeons and Dragons. And there was, concern around that. And because I was actually reading this stuff and playing this, I was like, it's just Dungeons and Dragons. It's literally what it is,
Right. Yes.
And certainly during the 90s, it was tough to watch, video game content and in general, just gaming content, this new thing be demonized by politicians and general religious culture. They're definitely all the things that I loved, punk rock and video games, was all demonized by the culture I grew up in. So there was very much this stuff I kept stuffed away in my closets, and was careful about what I played.
Right. Got it. All right. So fast forward, where does this turn into even, maybe the idea of a career? Because I don't know. I can't remember how young you were when you first started to get into the, video game world.
So I started making video games as a hobby, as like an indie hobby, while I was in high school still. I would just be making, and I would just make them for my friends. And then I would like hand them the game and have them play it. And I, because I wasn't being paid at the time, I never thought of it as a career. But the moment you start making anything, for whatever reason, your career has started. You are that artist,
True.
And I look back now and think, oh, I was, like the moment you start playing a guitar, you're a musician.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter if you're paid for it or if you have a career in it yet, you are a musician.
Yeah.
And that identity is so vital, I think, to getting people to see something through and develop. And then I remember it was my junior year in college where I thought, well, let me read about video game careers. And at the time there was this new engine called the Unreal Engine. And it more and more tools and games were shipping with these tool sets that you could then make more of that game with. So Unreal Tournament shipped with the Unreal Engine, and you could make more levels and you could modify it and put in your own characters and your own weapons and change the rules of the game and hack it. And there was a real shift towards non-programming design roles on teams. And teams were going from like 10 people to 50 or 60 people with the new like Xbox with the PS2.
Mm-hmm.
And it was this moment of explosive growth in terms of the what do you call it? The democratization of tooling. And so I got to get involved in some of that online. We're now at web forums. There's some information, however slow on these things. You can download tool sets for free. And I got really into that. So I'd be working in my engineering job, going to college, and then I would go home and then work on video game content. At the time, we were living in San Antonio, Texas, and I started driving up to Austin, Texas, and going to. I figured out that they had a scene up there. They actually had video game companies happening in Austin. So I would drive up to these mixers and social events in the video game industry and shake as many hands as possible, meet as many people as possible, and effectively beg for a job.
Wow.
Yeah. And then there was a moment where it wasn't happening. My senior year of college was coming up. And even though I was getting a degree in marketing, I convinced my advisor that he should let me do an internship and get credit for it in the video game space. And he said, well, if that's what you're going to do, you might as well get some credit for it. So I remember I drove up to Austin and I went to every video game. I got the address of every studio. I don't advise this now. You would get arrested. But I went to every single video game studio that day. And I just went and sat in the lobby with a stack of resumes. And I just asked to talk to someone in HR.
Wow.
And when I got, there'd be conversations like, well, they're busy right now. And I said, no problem. I'll wait here all day. And I would just sit and wait. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I'd see them talking to each other. They didn't know what to do. They're just video game developers. They're like, what do we do with this guy?
Right.
So eventually, they walk around and they ask, who do we have talk to this person? And many of them didn't have HR departments, and many of them didn't know what to do with walk-ins. There wasn't a process. And so eventually they'd send out some producer or somebody to talk to me, take my resume and have me go away,
Right.
And actually I got a couple callbacks, from that. I went to 33 studios in a day.
Wow.
And some of them, there's no way to get in. Some of them it was easy to hand off. Some of them I had to wait for an hour or so.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting a job testing at a studio called Ion Storm, Austin.
Okay.
I made $10 an hour, and I would just pick up objects and throw them into walls and doors and make sure they sounded correctly. I wrote all the MAC addresses for all the Xbox development kits in the whole studio and logged them and just did all the grunt work, that was needed. And that was my first foot in the door. But after that, it would take 2 more years of doing stuff on my own and meeting people and going to conferences before I landed a full-time role. It was tough.
Yeah. What's the stuff you were doing on your own? Were you just experimenting and continuing to make and create and just...
Yeah, I think that, with any creative career, there's this arc where you are growing so quickly. By the time you learn something new, the thing you created feels terrible.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's like 3 or 4 years of getting to a demo of a game that I made and then hating it because I learned how to do things better, and then starting over and making another demo and hating it, and then starting over. And there's just this process where you're just, Taylor Swift talks about having written 100 songs by the time she was 16. And I'd be willing to bet that many of those songs were not great.
Yeah, true. Right? Yeah.
And it's just that it's just doing the work of like learning the craft. And it took a few years.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so you get your job, and where does that take you?
So so I got a job working at a flip phone game company. So they did remember the flip phone games?
Yeah.
And the interface was all text and like little sprites. And worked on a basketball game, a football game, and then a game that tied into the Ben Stiller movie Dodgeball, the True Underdog Story.
Oh,
It was a dodgeball game
Yeah.
where you throw wrenches, and that lasted about 6 months until the company shut down. And then I got a job working at at the time the Nintendo DS was taking off.
Ooh.
And they were doing like work for hire, which is basically contracting. And you get like 6 months from start to finish to build a game for Hannah Montana, and then you do a game for I don't know, some Disney movie, and then you do another game with Spyro the Dragon, or they were just quick to market. None of them were particularly great. But I got to try lots of different genres. I got to try lots of different tool sets, and shipped 5 games over a couple of years.
Wow.
Which is pretty fast.
Yeah.
Now, were you like the sole person working on that, or were you the head of the team? Like,
no, I mean, I was coming up through the design ranks. So assistant designer, eventually lead designer. Typically you have 2 or 3 designers on one of those games. The total team size for that would be like 10 or 15.
Got it.
And you're doing a lot of reskinning. So you're like, okay, well, this is the IP we have. We're going to take this previous game that was made. We'll make it 5% better and put all new art in and ship it. So it was,
but the tools underneath are still the same. It's just like it's Simba instead of like something else, right? Or
100%. So it wasn't glamorous, and I remember hating it. But looking back, I really built some incredible relationships and loved working with the team and learned a lot. And I feel like, there are these moments of quick acceleration in the gaming industry, and every time one of those happened, technology or business model, my career advances. And then there are these periods where you're just sort of harvesting that, whatever that big advancement is. And my career is a little more stagnant during those periods. So, it definitely can chart, the development of the Unreal Engine, the all the money being made on the Nintendo DS, then, and that's how I ended up working at BioWare. So they were doing they had a DS division, and they were looking for designers. BioWare is a critically acclaimed, lauded role-playing game company. And they had made games that are beloved to this day, like Baldur's Gate and Dragon Age and Mass Effect, and kind of really nerdy stuff, real cerebral stuff. They're up in Edmonton, Alberta, which is closer to the Arctic Circle than the U.S. border. It's pretty intense.
Wow.
But they offered me a job, so my wife and I moved up there. We had just had a daughter, and I got to go work at BioWare. And shortly after that, they canceled the DS team, and I said, "Can I go work on Mass Effect 2?" Because I love that game, and I got to work on Mass Effect 2. This game is the highest rated game in the history of EA now,
Really?
and it's they're building it into a TV series, and it's sold millions and millions of copies. And so that opportunity was what really set my career. I got some gas in the tank, so to speak, now.
Yeah.
It went from struggling to stay employed and fear of being laid off to I get from getting most every interview since then that I've been able to get, which has been great.
Mm-hmm. Did they make big advances from the first one to 2 to make it?
Yeah, so I remember that typically you come into a game and there's a big design document, and it's details every system in the game. For Mass Effect 2, it was a spreadsheet, and they just listed every customer complaint, every player complaint, every issue, and they added what they're going to do next to it. It was like 120 some items on a spreadsheet. So they just had decided not to reinvent the wheel, to simply iterate and focus on the story. And they also made key hires, like their gameplay for combat was not great in the first one, and they brought in folks who really knew what they were doing for that. So sometimes all the stars align.
Yeah.
And that you're working on something special. And I remember I'd been working on it for a few months, and we took home a build 2 years before it shipped home with us. It was fully playable from start to finish. And I remember playing through it and just thinking, I think this is a hit. I think this is special.
Yeah.
And I think we all felt it. But it was a lot of work. It was 80-hour weeks. It was a pretty intense workload. But it transformed my career, and I'm very grateful for having worked on it. And this came out in I think 2012.
Okay. It's like 10, 11 years ago.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then what?
So I was wrapping up Mass Effect 3, which I worked on multiplayer for, doing prototypes for that. And I got a call from a friend at a studio in Chicago. They'd sold to Disney, and they needed a new studio creative director. And I was offered that job. So I got to go work at Disney, work on a bunch of mobile work, specifically with Marvel.
Nice.
And it was 3 years of really starting to appreciate what it means to lead a studio and a team. It was the first time I experienced that, being at the top can be quite lonely, truly, because, at the end of the day, you have to push people to do great work, but also they want things from you. They want promotions, and they want opportunities, and they want creative freedoms, but you're there to deliver the best thing for players and the best thing for the company. And so, learning leadership kind of in the deep end is really, really tough. But I got to do incredible things. I got to travel all around. I got to spend a lot of time with Disney. I got to go visit Disney Animation while they were working on Frozen, and got to see, that being made in real time, being there in the studio, and got to meet with the director and writer of Big Hero 6, and got to meet Stan Lee for a brief 30 seconds at New York Comic Con, and experience what it's like to be in front of cameras. I was pushed as a talking head, so to speak, during our PR campaign, and did hundreds of interviews and was on camera. And so learning all that, and that comes with that, which, we could talk a lot about, but that was an incredible experience. And that lasted about 3 years. It was a pretty intense 3-year period. And then Disney decided to divest from game development altogether. So I took my severance and went and rode mopeds around Italy, and caught my breath. And I then was given the opportunity to go build a bunch of infrastructure at Amazon Game Studios in 2014. And that's what brought me to Southern California.
Okay, that's about when we met. Yeah.
Yeah. And spent 4 years at Amazon building teams, building infrastructure, learning to operate in that environment. And
Amazon was making games, or they were doing?
They still are.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have invested a several billion-dollar investment in gaming so far. And they acquired Twitch during that time, so got to work a lot with Twitch.
Okay, cool.
Integrating that into game studios. And one of the benefits of working at a place like Amazon, just the access you get to other companies and other initiatives, and the network that you build can be very beneficial. But I think that I am inherently entrepreneurial, and so and And I think it's a bit of being loving punk rock, having
Right.
that like,
Yep.
I'll prove you otherwise attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that, so one of the things I ruffled a lot of feathers at Amazon, and because I really wanted to insist that we do great work. I really didn't want to regret the time that we had there to build with Amazon, to bring things to players. And the more slow moving, it seems counterintuitive that Amazon would be slow moving, but they're a big company now,
Yeah.
And I remember I have a good mentor who I worked with at Disney. He came over to Amazon while I was there. We worked together. And as I was exiting Amazon, he pointed out that, hey, that room full of executives doesn't care whether you're right or not. They care about how they feel after you interact with them.
Mm-hmm.
And because they have egos too.
Right.
And it was this light bulb moment, like, oh, leaders have feelings? What? I don't understand. Like that. And it was a real, like, it couldn't help me be more effective at Amazon because I was on my way out. But I left there and I went to a company called Congregate, which is a 16-year-old publisher. And I really took that to heart and really started to operate with my superiors and my leaders with a lot of empathy and understanding. I did a lot more listening. And I focused on building trust and helping them feel good about the interactions before I really focused on the substance. And it was life-changing, approaching it in that way.
What was the fruit that you saw as a result of that, you think?
Well, I mean, I came in and in 3 years at Congregate, I went from a general manager to a VP, from a VP to chief product officer, and then was given basically half the company to run, and all the revenue and all the current P&L was in my camp.
Wow.
And got them. I had an opportunity to reorganize them and get them on track to record profit before I left, and a lot of that is coming through. It's a shift from using hard power to soft power. One of the things that I took on the C-level role there is I took the time to meet individually with every single person.
How many people?
And just listen. 120 at the time.
Wow.
And just learned a lot about the organization and what makes them tick and what we're great at, what we're not great at. It really started with what are the things that we do better than anyone else, and are we fully optimizing? Are we doing all that we can there? And we weren't. And then looked at everything else as cuttable. Like, you just not do that other stuff. And was able to cut enough of that to optimize what we do the best. And it moved us very quickly to profit. And just spending time listening to people and getting them coaching and putting more career support in place, so people can just focus on doing their work. And I remember there were a few moments where I had more junior managers get frustrated that I wasn't just telling people, like, coming in and saying, this is the way it's going to be and you're going to do it. But a lot of that had been from being a more rigid and a more aggressive manager up into and including Amazon. And I just changed to a completely new way of doing things after that. And it's just been life-changing. Yeah. So
would you say did it feel even in your own body like the kind of person you were then when you weren't there, when you went home and you operating in a different kind of energy and space and mindset? Did that have also a positive impact on you? Or
I think yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Just generally less tense, allowing for people to figure it out and allowing for new ideas to emerge and caring more about their perception that is the right thing to do is almost more important than if I feel it's the right thing to do. Because them doing something that might not be optimal, but they believe in, is going to be way more powerful than them showing up every day working on something they don't believe in.
Right.
So I can influence. I can set there are realities around finances and capabilities, and making those clear. But once you establish those, I think giving people space to find their own footing, and challenging them to like solve themselves the issue in front of them has been a real game changer. It sounds funny, but one of the big influences has been Ted Lasso. I don't know if you've watched it.
Love it.
I think it's like one of the best resources on leadership.
For sure.
Really, that's
yes.
good.
I keep saying who's going to start having staff meetings and they're going to do leadership training through Ted Lasso.
Yeah, great. Get the Diamond Dogs together.
You should do a seminar. You should do
amazing.
We do a video series, Keith.
Yeah.
I think there should be a Ted Lasso class in colleges and MBA programs. I think it's just
weirder things exist. Weirder things
Yeah,
exist,
that's right.
certainly.
Yeah. I'm not. It's not a joke. I really think just to be clear for all the listeners, like you could do worse than watching every episode of Ted Lasso to prepare for a leadership role.
Yeah. It's I wondered how many people got it, and then how many just it blew right past them, and they didn't see some of those little nuances of what he was up to. So my question,
they saw it as a comedy, right?
Right. Yeah.
Just a comedy.
Yep.
Yep.
And or cute, and or that there wasn't really something that he was doing that was very maybe subtle but very intentional and right.
Yeah.
Did the Amazon experience, you and I, we weren't spending tons of time together, but I remembered it was a difficult window, as you were leaving there. But was there anything else that was happening, or how did you get those? I guess how did you get those lessons? Because people can go through that and not turn it around quickly, and hear what your mentor said and make the adjustment.
Yeah. Well,
why did you do that? How were you able to?
Well, let me focus on what I could have done better. I'm not looking to beat myself up, but just to illustrate the difference.
Yep.
I found that they were making a lot of incorrect decisions. They were spending top dollar to get the best game industry talent they could, and then would proceed to ignore all the experience and insist that we need to learn to be more Amazonian in our thinking,
Right.
And so they were making decisions about they're building their own tech and building their own e-commerce store and building their own distribution and building their own games with new team. There's just too many new things. And I was really pushing them to figure out an incremental approach where they could ship little experiments and learn, be fast to market, and just treat that investment that they would spend less money and move faster, thinking of it like that. Mike Frazzini, who was the executive in charge, there's a lot of press that has been written about these moments. And I would say from an empathetic perspective, for a variety of reasons, Mike Frazzini was put in a very difficult position. He had a really amazing idea that added 9 figures a year to Amazon in the early days. He was one of the first 500 employees there. And he was a protege of Andy Jassy, who now runs Amazon. But he came into gaming thinking, I'm going to show them how Amazon would do this, and we're going to make it Amazonian. And it just didn't work. And it got to a point where he, I'm sure, couldn't know who to trust, and especially not a mid-level, like a senior level product manager telling him all the things he should be doing, or outright define him or challenging him in meetings, or, and so, I think I didn't do a good enough job of just building trust on the front end, because I didn't inherently value that relationship fundamentally. I just wanted to get things done because I thought that was my job.
Yeah.
And the work ultimately in any leadership role is the people,
Yeah.
and the work will follow. So just reordering my priorities was a big shift. Whereas at Congregate, during my time there, I really focused on building sincere connections and sincere relationships and just listening, and spending time affirming when the CEO was frustrated and upset about something, even if it was my fault, just saying, yeah, that is super frustrating. Yeah, I totally get that. Yeah, we need to fix that. Just making sure he doesn't feel lonely, making sure he was heard.
Right.
Not to extract any benefit, but because I sincerely cared about him, and what he was going through.
Yeah.
And taking the time for that and setting time aside for that, or check-ins, or finding genuine ways to connect with people. It's been a real shift, and that it's actually more fun to do it that way. Yeah. Anyhow.
Right.
You get to have more dinners, and you get to have more time just asking about their kids and learning about their lives. And something you've done really well, Keith, is that deep curiosity. It leads all your conversations.
Yeah.
And that's it's just been that deep curiosity diffuses even tense interactions. Often, if you have someone come in hostile or resistant, and you just start being curious, it breaks down those barriers pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yep. That you said it. I mean, it was so profound, but you just said it when you talked about, the role of leadership is the people. And it's like you all of a sudden it just clicked for you, because you are a people person, but like you said, you went into Amazon and whatever, that created in you that was more focused on task. And maybe that's just what you thought or knew to do, but it's so crystal clear to hear how it clicked. And then you were able to just like do what you do, and it sounds like, man, the fruit, the outcomes followed really well. Powerful. Yeah.
It's the good news is that if you can look back on your time and realize that you're doing it better, that you've grown, that's exactly what you're supposed to feel.
Exactly.
So,
right.
I don't beat myself up. It'd be worse if I look back and think I haven't learned anything.
Right. Yeah. Or, and because you didn't need to, right? Even worse, right? So, can we talk about Survivor for a minute?
Yeah, let's do it.
What about Survivor? Were you on Survivor?
Brandon knows nothing.
Oh man, I like
that. So I have applied to Survivor for 27 times now.
Right, that's right. Keith briefly mentioned this. I did. So you've applied and gotten denied 27 times.
Yes, I talked to casting once, and I've gotten to know some of the people who work on the show, who are lovely and amazing. I think that I love the work of Anthony Bourdain. I love Survivor. I have this general drive that comes from, I don't want to regret not having taken advantage of everything our short lives have to offer.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to be willing to put myself out there when I want something and be insistent, whether it's driving up to game studios in Austin and going to every single one.
Right.
I've been raising capital for my latest company, the venture world, and pitched to 120 some people and have yet to raise money. And that tells me I just need to do another 120 more. That's fine.
Yeah.
It's just this, I think, relentlessness and grit.
For sure.
And just consistency.
That's
Yeah.
It matters. But I think the key though is to not let it drive you to the point where you're, it becomes mentally detrimental to your own health.
Right.
Or to other people's, or to borderline, My friend had this roommate who would post these posters trying to get Judd Apatow to give him a job, and it was like, you're crossing like the restraining order line at a certain point sometimes with tenacity, but you gotta. But you seem like you got a reasonable, relentless. I like that, relentless.
Mostly. I've had to compensate either direction to get it healthy. But yeah, Survivor for me has been this motivation to take care of myself so I could physically compete on the show if ever cast. But it's also been a way to make myself get in front of a camera and get comfortable with myself shooting audition videos.
after audition video.
Yeah. That's right.
Do you have to be naked in the audition video, or is that they make you wear normal clothes?
Normal clothes. That's something. Yeah. I don't know.
Gotta save the mystery for the real season. Yeah.
That's right. Always bring good underwear to Survivor. You don't don't bring the whitey tighties. You got to bring the nice underwear. Yeah.
And do you continue to be a fan of the show each season?
So typically, yes. This season I've been behind because it's been a very weird time. Yeah. And I've been traveling a lot, and so I have a backlog of like 10 episodes we got to catch up on.
Right.
But, yeah, I'm a big fan, and there was a while where I would go back and watch back seasons. And also the evolution of the game has been so fascinating from a game design perspective. Yeah. These are many of the contestants grew up watching it and have lived and breathed it.
Yeah.
They're the kids who watched it with their parents, and so I think that it's first of all, it's like season 44 coming up, I think.
Yep.
That's crazy.
Yep.
And Jeff is still going stronger than ever.
Yes.
They still have 6-7 million viewers live every week, which is really good in a streaming era. Mm-hmm. They're one of the most popular stream shows on, was it Paramount now?
I think, Paramount, I think it is.
And I don't see any time, even if Jeff retires, I think, give it 5 years, they'll revive it with a new host. Mm-hmm. And it's endured so well that now there was a bunch of international versions in 2000 when it first aired. Yeah. But now Australian Survivor is going strong now. New Zealand Survivor, South African Survivor. So there's all these international versions that are now.
Wow, what a brand.
It's a huge brand, and I think it's one of these things that people don't think about because it's old and ancient in terms. It's like Simpsons age. It's pretty old.
Oh, true. Yeah.
But if you watched it today versus one of the first 10 seasons, it's a completely different show.
Of how they play the game.
Of how they play the game, of the branding, how they shoot it, how they tell stories. Yeah. And so for me, I'm always fascinated by these things that endure. Like World of Warcraft is now on year 20? We're coming up on 20 soon. How do you? And the way that you do that is you content program it in a way that's compelling for people who've been there the whole journey, but also new people. And that's a really hard thing to do. Mm-hmm. It's a monumental creative task to keep people interested in the same thing for 22 years.
Much less 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Right.
So they're doing something there that's worth learning, especially in a culture that's everything's so disposable. It's neat to see something endure.
Yeah.
And in general, I'm deeply inspired by anyone who's exercising their craft at a high level.
Yeah, like they are. Yeah.
And the editors on that show, the challenge, John Kerhofer, who I know, who designed the challenges. I mean, he's designed thousands of different challenges, and they always seem interesting. Mm-hmm.
True. Brandon, do you watch much Survivor?
I only watched the first season when I was living in my grandma's house. And I remember watching the very first season when I was like 9 or 10. But so
I've watched most of them.
Wow.
I'm like,
careful.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Patrick?
Careful. I mean, I've heard that story a lot. And then somebody's like, I'll go check it out. And they get sucked into it.
So watch out.
Yeah.
It's a lot of episodes. Yeah.
As someone who works behind the scenes sort of in video and TV, I try and I consume about as little as I probably more than most. I consume less than most people. So my ability to get sucked into things is luckily helped. Yeah. But no, I hear it's pretty cool. And and now if you watch every episode, it's it's one of those things where I'm also fascinated to see how it's changed now that I think about it, right? Because I always just assumed it was probably doing the same thing like after 20 years, or 44 seasons, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, one of their tenets is to change it every season.
Got it. Oh, cool.
And try new things every season. I think it keeps it interesting for folks like Jeff, who host it.
So
I think it's fascinating.
Have they given you, they know you or first name, but has anyone else tried out 27 times to not make it? Do you know?
I'm sure there is, almost certainly. and there are people who have tried out 30 times and made it, so it's,
yeah,
you're in Southern California, so casting is so random.
Yeah.
Like, right. You may not have it, but it could just be that they already cast the person who fits your stereotype for them that season, or they, right now they're really focused on getting a more diverse cast that looks more like America and younger, because so many of their viewers are now Gen Z viewers.
Got it.
And that's not me, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm glad they're doing that. So it's been this but it is weird because in the back of my mind, I'm like, it's just a matter of time. It's an unreasonable expectation. So, when I start a company or I join a startup like I have, or I go get a new job, there's always this do I caveat, that I try out for Survivor every season and I might have to go away for 6 weeks. and when you're interviewing for C-level roles at Fortune, 10 companies, that's a different conversation than when I was just a game designer. It's a
yeah.
So now I just don't have the conversation anymore. It's not worth it.
It'll make you stand out in the interview. You're like, that Survivor guy, there really was something, everybody else has the same resume. You're that'll help you stand, in auditions. My mom always said that'll help you stand out. It's important,
That's funny.
Wow. Well, let's talk about where you're at now, because when you were back in town, we hung out and I got to hear what was going on. And I was so excited. So
thank you,
our listeners, what happened. Yeah. Why aren't you at Congregate?
Well, so there's this entrepreneur named Mark Pincus. He started a company called Zynga. If you played Mafia Wars or Farm Bill back in the day, that was Zynga.
Farm Bill, yeah.
Yeah, he sold Zynga last year for $12.6 billion.
In ones?
And
in ones.
Yes, in $1 bills.
Yeah, in $1 bills.
Yes, there you go.
And he has a startup founder. He also invests and incubates new companies, and he incubated this new startup that at the time was this music live streaming platform with two-way streaming, so that you can actually see the people you were streaming to and have gamified interactions with them. The CEO who had that up had a personal situation where they could not continue with the company, needed to step down, but they had raised about $4 million in capital. So he couldn't just quit, he had to see it. So I got one day a text from a friend, said, "Hey, Mark Pincus wants to talk to you." Which was it'd be like you getting a text that, "Hey, Bill Gates wants to talk to you," or "Hey,"
right.
You're like, "Okay, sure." And sure enough, it wasn't him, but his team, and went through the process, and they recruited me to head up this company. Took that over in June, and have now transitioned it to a Web3 metaverse, two-way live experience platform. The key difference is being that we're expanding beyond music. We have a version 2 of the platform that we're working on that's really leaning into virtual avatars and using AI to create interesting interactions. It's a very buzzwordy thing.
Yes.
And we're raising more money for it. But it's been very interesting being in this world where my investors include a number of well-known billionaires, and I've been attending venture capital events and being in this culture where they all disappear to go to Burning Man, and they all, it's just it is like Silicon Valley, the comedy show, but in real life, and it's the culture can be pretty aggressive and pretty intense. So there's a lot of money involved. So it's been a whirlwind of learning. We have a team in India. We have folks in California. And all this happening while, now the economy is projected to be potentially, at the time of this recording, there's a lot of uncertainty and concern. And so venture capital is drying up, investments are drying up. And it's at the same time, we have a lot of very exciting things happening, talking to major companies about partnerships and strategic partnerships. So, I actually got a therapist to help me transition through this role because I knew it was going to be weird.
Yeah.
And talking about how my your typical understanding of like, I have a job and I have to be here from this hour to this hour, versus what I have now, which is I have a series of strategic relationships and partnerships going on that I need to nurture and bear fruit out of and come to some business understanding. But the hours are irrelevant, whether they're 100 hours a week or 10.
Right.
The point is to deliver results.
Yep.
And it's a weird, and to preserve our runway and buy us enough time for these relationships, we've unfortunately had to do a round of layoffs, and we've taken care of people, and we've given really good severance packages and career coaching. We're really helping people transition, but it means it's gotten really weirdly quiet for me, except when it's not.
Right.
And I am struggling with this. Like, I've always been the hustler, the person who's always going above and beyond. This, relationship with hustle culture and this relationship with busyness has been a weird one. Trying to unwire that out of my brain, but at the same time, dealing with some of the toxicity of big money and venture capital. Right now in the news, you see all the venture capital around Web3 and FTX collapsing and scandals, and I mean that's just part of the space,
Right.
And it's been really interesting to try to figure out who am I in this and what are my values, and it's a lot easier for me when I just was an employee at a company and I was a pretty clear-cut set of principles and values, and they would evolve over time, but you end up in a lot of more challenging ethical situations, and also you have more legal exposure. I've had folks threaten legal action or do, so it's how do I navigate all that and still hold the values that I want to have. And I think the reason that so many billionaires and entrepreneurs are not kind is because it's just that defense mechanism against all those things. People wanting things, people constantly trying to sell them stuff, people mad about this or wanting this to change. When they do lean in and try to care, they often get burned.
Yeah. And
so their reaction is to simply just shut it all off and stop caring.
Right.
And just be supremely selfish minded. And you can also, when you have success, I think, we've seen some behavior from some other billionaires in the news, that, it can perpetuate this idea of being like, they start to see themselves as a deity almost.
For sure.
So it is it's a very, and I'm just at the beginning of that entrepreneurial journey and being part of that environment, and so I'm learning a lot still through all this. But that's what makes it challenging.
For sure. And you started, was it June, did you say?
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, just 6 months in. Yeah.
Do you mind going into, so my little sister, she works in tech, and she actually did just get laid off. She was telling me that there's kind of like an industry-wide shutdown. Is there a specific reason, or is it just that like money's tight, or is there like something that happened, or?
I think it's a combination of a few things. One is, tech went into serious demand during COVID when we were all home, and services, especially around convenience, went way up.
Duh.
And so, their growth projections went from, hey, we're going to grow 10% or 15% this year to we're going to grow 60% this year or 80%. Like, look at Zoom.
Right.
Just explosive growth.
Sorry, Skype.
And
but yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I think that but no one knew if there would be a low, how big the low would be after COVID, as things, how normal, what is normal anymore. And as companies are starting to get a sense of what is normal, and economic growth is slowing down, and that's being further slowed down by the federal, stimulus or interest rate raises. They're being very proactive about pulling back because they don't know how much of a contraction there will be. That's part of it. The other part is that many companies or venture capitalists hold public positions in companies that went public. And when your stock market crashes 20, 30% in a week, Now you're not as liquid. You want to hold those assets, and so you're preserving cash.
Got it.
Yeah, that's very boring. I don't know how exciting podcast got to.
No. That's I think because the tech industry is so part of our lives, but we have no idea how it really runs. It's not like I feel like people sort of know how movies, like see like director, but it's such a black box of like what the heck's really going on in this industry that basically dominates our world, right? Mm-hmm. Would you say like the tech industry is probably the most powerful as far as like size? It's pretty small for how powerful it is. No.
Oh, it hits way above its weight for sure.
Yeah, it's
and the economics are crazy because you don't have the physical overhead of, say, car manufacturing or making ovens. If your business grows, so does your overhead in a traditional physical space. But when something hits in tech, the amount of revenue that can come in is so massive and so fast. You can't hire fast enough. You can't spend the money fast enough sometimes. And so it creates, when you're growing like they did during COVID, it just seems like the money's never going to end. Like you're like, can't believe
it's like an oil well. Making. Yeah. Or like
you just like, just pouring oil out, but then suddenly it slows way down and you don't know how much farther it's going to go and people get scared. So it is both the growing probably too fast and the contraction are probably both very speculative in nature. But I mean, over time, as much tech as we have in the world, the rate of growth is only accelerating still. And, with huge advances in AI and the rebuilding of the internet right now into Web3, it's going to only get crazier. So it is I think about this a lot. When I got into video games, it was a pretty niche thing. Barely existed. It was in its 20th year of existence. And since I joined, it has dwarfed music, and then it dwarfed film, and now it's dwarfed both film and music combined.
Wow.
And it's only continuing to rapidly expand. And now we see... for a while there's all these comic book movies, and now we have more and more properties that are coming from the video game space being optioned for wide mass popular culture adoption. And then you have folks like Mr. Beast and these YouTube personalities or Ninja who are signing all these brand deals, who are now fashion icons and doing branded deals. And so I really think that gaming culture is like what hip hop was in the 90s as it was emerging and becoming the force it is today. And to be part of that and not have expected any of that and just being swept up in it has been so thrilling and crazy. And, it's just been really, nerd culture and geek culture has become culture.
Yeah. Where I had this joke, it's like when I was a kid, there were people were worried the guys were playing too many video games. Like now they have hot girls on these things. It's like kids today have no hope. Like at least we had to get outside to talk to girls back in the 90s. Now they got they're never getting off these damn things now. But
so I started. I'm in Virginia now, where I live, and I started a local Central Virginia chapter of the International Game Developer Association, which is the
awesome.
I would guess the trade organization. And we've held 2 events, and our second event was at capacity. We had 65 people show up, and the majority of them were women, college students.
Really?
And more people of color, and it's just incredible to see what was used to be just pasty white guys in a garage or that office is now looking a lot like what it just looks like general population now.
Awesome. And
it makes me very hopeful for where we're growing and what we're doing.
Hey, can you explain for all of us non-nerds Web 3.0?
Yeah, I don't even,
In layman's terms.
So I've been working in this since 2019, and I think part of what makes it challenging is that a lot of the buzzwords that have been introduced are used to create a perception of expertise for people who look to, capitalize or rebrand themselves as an expert or are looking for fast cash. That is not my position at all. I've built and shipped 2 blockchain-based games, looking to provide real benefit to people. So Web3 is the idea of a decentralized internet, one that people don't own. So there's, the closest thing I would equate it to is like open source tools and tech,
sure,
where we collectively own this thing and we collectively contribute to it and build it. And the idea on a Web3 would just be that there's no central authority verifying these things. It's this shared verification across multiple people. And so that means that, theoretically, you wouldn't have any one company owning it like Apple owns the App Store. Mm-hmm. And that's part of it. I also think about Web3, let me take a step back. The metaverse and Web3 are different, and the metaverse doesn't necessarily have to be 3D VR. The metaverse for me is a merging of real world and virtual world.
Okay.
And I would argue today that Pokemon Go is part of a metaverse. Mm-hmm. Roblox with all its branded crossovers is part of the metaverse. World of Warcraft is not Web3, but it could be considered part of a metaverse that exists. Gaming people have been building this forever. So it drives, I'm fine with it because I'm excited about anything that drives interactive entertainment forward. But a lot of traditional old school gamers are just so frustrated by basically what they see as a labeling of what they've been doing for 40 years. Yeah. Like we've been doing this since the 90s. Right. What are you talking about?
Right.
But I think that decentralized component is certainly important. And blockchain is a decentralized currency or verification system that has yet to really provide a frictionless experience that we actually want to use, like a Venmo wallet or a PayPal wallet. And the metaverse is not, I don't think, Mark Zuckerberg's VR fever dream. I think it's, I do think, having virtual avatars is a big part of that. Like be able to maintain online anonymity and present myself in a way that I feel comfortable doing via virtual avatar or filters. Mm-hmm. I think is part of that. So it's this combination of it's me, but there's digital assets and digital things overlaid. And I think that's a really fascinating thing to think about. Or it's what I'm navigating here is things that I can talk about and not talk about that I'm working on or not working on, and also try to articulate it in words that make sense. Yeah. At the end of the day, for everyone out there, there's going to be something that you fall in love with, some piece of technology that does whatever you love, and you'll find out later that it's considered the metaverse or Web3. It shouldn't matter to the average person what label. They should just, there are things that are useful for your lives and things that are not.
Yeah.
But I am looking forward to a day in which a company like Meta or a company that's Facebook or a company like TikTok isn't given so much power and so much information, and where the ecosystem is more decentralized, I think is probably a healthy thing. I just don't know. It could be. It's probably farther off than the industry wants it to be. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, I get to make a lot of really neat things with the technology, and it enables me to make games I want to make and create experiences I want to make. So for me, it's just all upside.
Right, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Do you want to segue into Applause and what you've been doing with that, or is that something you can talk about because it's already out?
Oh, yeah. Well, so I talked about it a little bit. So Applause is a two-way live experience platform as it is today. We've been focused on musicians and helping. We have a jazz clarinetist named Pilo, and he's made something like $25,000 in donations on the platform.
Dang.
And we currently monetize like 10x that over any other streaming platform. So there's a lot. It's very positive. We have a long road to get to version 2. So we do need funding. So, I'm in the midst of fundraising for that. And like anything, you have to accept the possibility that it's not the right time. And so we've extended our runway, and we are we are also talking to other big major partners about doing a strategic partnership where they fund our development without investing directly.
Mm-hmm.
Someone's getting arrested.
Yep.
Costa Mesa, West Side.
It's you for violating your NDA right now.
Yeah. But I think that what it has done is it's gotten me in the room with a lot of interesting people and companies that I cannot talk about.
Hey, congrats. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I love that.
Yeah.
And the music angle has been really fun. Like I love music. I've always loved music. And I can talk about this. So one of the employees that works with me, he's been working in the music industry a long time and very well connected. And I got to be invited to Manny Marroquin is a mixing engineer, famous mixing engineer and producer. He has a restaurant called Verse in LA. That's used to be a wing of I forget the name of it. It's a very famous recording studio, and he's converted to a restaurant. And he has it mic'd, so he has live music. You go eat amazing, incredible food, and then they record the performance while you're there, and they'll have to do like a residency with like Robin Thicke or some other artist, and he'll mix that record and put out a live at Verse album for that artist.
Nice.
As part of the residency there. Nothing ever like it. But I was there, and Manny came by the table, and I know who he is. He mixed all of Linkin Park's most of Linkin Park's records, and I mentioned to him that like I really love those. I really loved those later records because I felt like they did a lot of experimental synth music that could have been really grating and not that really hard to listen to. And he made it so warm and it sounds so full. And I remember he paused and he looked at me and he just said, I really miss Chester. And it was just this incredible moment where like I'm talking to one of Chester Bennington's best friends, and he's grieving the loss of his friend. Yeah. And I just, all I could say was, I'm really grateful for the music that you made with him, and it was just this profound moment where it was just like a real human moment.
Right. We're just like I was thinking, humanness and reality all just broke right in.
Yeah, and the opportunity to have real interactions with people that I respect and who have been part of creating amazing things. Not that I, of course, I don't revel in his pity, or not his pity, his sadness, his grief. Yeah. But to have those interactions and have it be so grounded and real, it was a real to have a night hanging with Manny Marroquin was amazing. Yeah. And anyway, so like it's those kinds of experiences that when I started making video games, I just wanted to be, tucked away in a dark room and make video games. I didn't think that I'd be, hanging with the mixing engineer and producer who worked on Linkin Park albums.
Right. Yeah. Interesting trajectory for yourself.
Yeah. 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 I have a friend that sent me a picture of him and Snoop hanging out a couple weeks ago. And it's just, gaming culture has intersected so heavily. It's been and the thing is, like, I look forward to the next, hopefully 20, 30 years of my career, and it only gets better. Mm-hmm. There's no slowing down. It's amazing.
Right. Yep. Yeah. So, is the platform something that one day, still a musician like my daughter Alex? Is it somebody like just a person that just a normal person can still potentially use for something?
Absolutely, yeah. So someone like Alex could absolutely do an event for their fans. They would promote it on TikTok or Instagram, and they get to talk directly with their fans. And Alex wouldn't have to go on tour. They wouldn't have to have it be weird. It's moderated, and we moderate. We take care of it. And the donations, if they're Alex is doing great work and growing, and I'm sure it has way more interesting stuff in the works that she hasn't talked about.
Right.
But in the meantime, it's nice to bring home some tips, some donations, and some support from your fans.
Absolutely.
People got bills to pay. That can help fund a tour. It can help get new t-shirts done or whatever. So I think it's absolutely open. Applause.stream or applause.us. You can set up your own event or reach out to us and we'll help you run an event. We are rebuilding the platform right now. Right now it has a very high technical barrier to use that we want to improve. And we're envisioning the platform being more interactive and allowing maybe musicians who don't know or understand live streaming on Twitch or YouTube to have a low barrier experience to stream and have a lot of prompts for them to react to, because musicians who sit and will sing a song for 2-3 minutes aren't always the best conversationalists in a digital room. It's awkward often. Yeah. So giving them things to react to or call out or say thank you to or understand how the fans are interacting in a way that's not that's, you're not having to talk to them necessarily, and you're not having to read text chat to keep up with them.
Right.
So we're doing a lot on the platform. It's super interesting. But it also may take the form of not our own platform, but it may take an acquisition or strategic partnership look in the next few months. So
yeah, so interesting.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Is it just for musicians right now, or because I'm a stand-up comedian, I was been wanting to do you guys? No,
we ran comedian events, and they did pretty well. We actually have a whole we have a mode that you can run in that instead of getting applause, you get laugh emojis. Nice. But we are expanding like comedy, makeup artists, art people doing fine art,
live painting, that kind of thing.
Yeah, wellness, things that the crowd participates in. And we're doing a lot of interesting experiments of using AI camera detection to get a sense of what your audience is doing just by reading the webcam.
Oh wow!
Whether
they're smiling or laughing or something like.
Exactly. Yeah, cool. So you can get immediate analytical read on the crowd, but it's reading their reactions using machine learning. So really cool stuff like that. And then you can even think about conversational AI around moderation, auto moderation. So, there's a lot of stuff happening on a stream while you're trying to perform that you can't pay attention to. But most of the interactions that moderators have are pretty routine, and it's a lot of the same stuff over and over. So, and now with conversation AI getting so good, being able to use that as a way to basically have your bouncer and your your crowd minder do all that work for you, so you can just focus on stream, giving the best possible performance. The one thing that every platform struggles with, even Twitch and YouTube now, is that signal to noise ratio. There's just so much content, and driving discoverability of a new audience is what everyone wants, but it's the hardest thing to give. Even TikTok is starting to struggle to deliver new audiences to artists. So that's an area that I think, we still need to do a lot of thought around.
Yeah.
Now, how many people use your platform? How many active performers, or I guess how many performers / how many people also watch? So we're very much like in an early validation phase. So we've had around 40,000 people use the tech. Okay. Yeah.
About 85,000 people have watched. Okay. But we're still very much in the early, like I took over in June and figured out what I want it to be in like October, what it really needs to be. Because like any piece of technology, you basically want to achieve this organic growth curve. So you don't have to go spend a ton of money on marketing if you can help it. And to get there, we need to make some improvements. So we'll see.
That's like you've really only been working on it for 2 months, it sounds like, and then I'm sure most of it is still all the stuff you've decided to do hasn't even gotten implemented yet, right?
No, it's still being designed. We're still spending cycles on designing and thinking about the tech stack, and but we have been running experiments and trying out new things on our current tech stack, to validate ideas. But it's
well, the hard thing too is people use, so I always tell this to people when I would make short films or indie movies, it's like it's like when most people see these $1 billion movies and then you try and, it's like if everyone always drove in a Ferrari and then you're like, hey, do you want to ride in my go-kart that's working? It's like, that's the problem with just everything starting out new is going to seem like it's barely anything compared to these like $1 trillion things we have like already in our culture.
Yeah,
right?
for sure. And honestly, like when things get that big, working at Amazon, once it gets so large, and you're just a cog in a wheel, you can't really, like your daily work doesn't even impact that much,
True.
your relative. And so, right now my job is to build a user growth machine effectively, and by maximizing benefit and lowering friction. And that just takes time. It took Twitch, probably 7 years to get to that. And this company is 2 years in. So it takes a monumental effort, a lot of luck, and a lot of runway. So right now, we're in this, we've learned a lot. We now know what we want to build next, but we need to figure out who we're going to do it with.
Yeah.
But if artists are still interested in getting involved, the app is functional at its current level, right? And people should still get involved, or?
Well, I mean, yes. So I would encourage people to try it out if they want to. There's still a lot of benefit. We're really good if you have an audience already of making you more money than you've ever made on any other platform.
Cool.
So like Tilo has about 1.7 million TikTok followers. He goes live on TikTok Live, and then he'll switch over to Applause. So he'll convert that live audience over to his Applause event, and that donation button and the way of interacting with Applause really drives, and they get to see him and they get to dance. You look like when you turn it on, it's a bunch of like women in their 40s and 50s drinking wine and dancing to jazz clarinet over Michael Jackson beats, and he crushes it.
That's awesome.
He's taken home $600-700 in 2 hours before. He's really good at it. And so, but I think one of the issues now with live streaming in general is the technical barrier. And there are people who are really good at streaming. It is a different kind of performance. It's a different way of interacting than say it's more like busking on the side of the street,
right? Yeah.
Than I would call a performance, because you're trying to keep people's attention. You're interacting with the crowd. Doing comedy like on the side of a street would be different than doing it in a club.
Oh yeah. I do it at a coffee shop, so sometimes it does feel that way. But so maybe I'm perfect.
I know. I think that's relevant. Yeah, people are there to get their like triple espresso, extra foamy oatmeal latte, and you're there cracking jokes and you're trying to win them over.
It's a different. It's like hitting on people. It's like bothering.
It is.
So all at once.
I mean, at least the awkwardness at least gives you something to talk about or make jokes about, I'm sure.
No, it's true, and the microphone helps. It's a power, No, that's so. Thanks for trying. Because I feel like this whole thing of like mixing the internet and real life is like the new way that. Because I think we all thought that we'd just be living in the internet, but it's pretty apparent that we like to exist in the real world. And it's funny. I was thinking about this. Silicon Valley always like fuels on these technologies that come out and they're going to change the world. Do you remember Magic Leap?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Whatever happened to Magic Leap? That was going to be like, we're all going to, like, I feel like that's one problem with Silicon Valley. It's like there are all these technologies that maybe you could talk about this. Were there any technologies that were like so going to change the world that never became anything? And is the opposite true, where there was something that nobody thought was going to change anything that became like the Segway? Yeah.
Segway.
That's exactly.
Right?
The Segway.
What else did you say?
I think we called them they were called the people movers. People weren't going to walk anymore.
Yes, right.
We're all going to stop walking.
Yeah, exactly. You get it.
So I think that there is this thing that think about where most technology is funded and built. At least before COVID, it's rich cities on the coast, and so it's no wonder that we get food delivery services and basically valet services and everything's the Uber of, whatever. And everything feels like it's going to change everything. But like for Thanksgiving, I went to Kansas City, Missouri, at Lee's Summit, out like 40 minutes in the suburbs. And everyone there, people there don't think like that at all. And that's most of the country, and that's most of Canada. And that's, and then most of these companies aren't building outside of U.S. and Canada. Those are just expansion markets. You go to Indonesia, it's very different. You go to Japan, it's very different. Sweden operates. So there is a highly so many tech companies pilot their gaming's a little different, but they pilot their apps in San Francisco and then they pilot in New York City and so you get these echo chambers of affirmation. But to scale something truly global or to solve a problem that is felt by somebody living in Wichita, Kansas, or in Idaho or something, they're not even going to know that problem exists for those people half the time because there's no one funding those things. And so there is a real problem with Stanford grads who then go and live in Silicon Valley and work there and don't get a perspective on what about the other 99% of people. And that's not to say that going to Stanford's bad or that working in Silicon Valley is bad. But it is going to limit your perspective on the problem sets that you could be solving and how you could change things. But I do think this is changing with remote work. It is changing a lot. And I'm in an incubator right now, a cohort of startups folks. And there's the guy who's in the weed, and he's based in Orange County, California, of course. And just to mention that, and he's every bit the surfer, beach city guy that you can imagine. Nice. But then you have incredible medical startups in Colorado. You have a gelato startup in Canada. You have, and they're thinking about businesses like gelato and patient recovery in ways that no one else is thinking about. Partly because I think they live in a different area with different value sets, and they're exposed to different problems, and so I think that's a big part of it. And I think remote work is so valuable in allowing your employees and startups and VCs to get a broader perspective on the world. I'm hopeful that that will be better.
Right.
Well, it's like you're saying, technology solves problems that exist, and it's like of all the problems you have are the San Francisco ones, which are like parking and, a $50 sandwich. It's like, yeah, it's not.
Yeah. And there's a bit of a song and dance with venture capital. I've been under a lot of pressure to BS my way to raising money, to just change my story every time I pitch it. No, we're actually making this. Oh, no, we're making that. Well, and keep pivoting the story until it lands. And then you're stuck with delivering on that story that you sold, and by the point that lands and you get your $5 million check or $20 million check, of course it's become the next life-changing, game-changing thing. And then of course it's vaporware because you made it up to raise money.
Yeah.
And that's a bit of the game and a bit of the and I think the VC world knows this, but it's still the thing that they want to hear because it's how they then go to their investors who they raise money from and unlock that funding by being able to tell them that story. So it's this, it is a game,
Or it's like mitigating. It's like we did all the right things, and so if it doesn't work out, it's like, well, that was because of luck, right? It's like if we played the game right, and even if the game was, like you said, vaporous, or like a Ponzi scheme.
We gave them the exact pitch that they want, and venture capital funds make money on there's what's called the carry, so they get a percentage of what the fund makes, but they also get a 2-3% fee on. So if they raise $100 million fund, they get $2 to $3 million every year, and they make profit on that. So they make money whether the investors make money or not, and so they're a bit incentivized to just get the money spent.
Got it. Wow.
And out in the ecosystem. So I think, there are issues fundamentally with, it's like the best, it's like, it's the best system we have right now for raising money systemically, but there are weird incentives that create a hype factor and a lot of vaporware, I think.
But like you said, that might just be a part of it or transitory, and it's not it's not the majority, right? I'm sure that's, or maybe, enough good work gets done clearly that the industry moves on. But
well, the winners are big enough that people make money for sure.
Yeah.
And it's always compared to what, buying bonds or buying, individual stocks in bigger companies. And so I think that statistically, venture capital funds do not outperform the S&P 500. But there are a few funds and a few venture capitalists that have outperformed. So it's a little bit of like, on average, you're going to do worse, but when you do better, you do way better. I pitched to companies like Sequoia, who funded Apple.
Oh yeah,
years, and so, or General Catalyst, I've pitched to, like a lot of the big firms, and they've had a lot of success in the past. But yeah, I think the structure and the incentives do create a lot of hype, and they do create a lot of scandal, and they will continue to do so. But I do hope that as things go more remote, we'll see improvement.
So I'm going to switch gears here and just talk about what do you do for your own level of, and maybe this isn't a word in the Silicon Valley tech thing, but like or maybe it's overly done, self-care, staying grounded. And is that an unusual thing that people talk about in the tech world, or is that a normal thing that people talk about? Family, being grounded, self-care, kindness, compassion, flourishing, those kinds of words that I try to think about a lot when I'm working with, hospice patients and families and celebration of life. I have such a different world I live in.
I would say that is not part of the vernacular in Silicon Valley. There's this idea of like when things with your family that need attention, or you need, to focus on your own health, mental well-being. Yeah. There's this like, oh, we're so sorry to hear that. That's really hard. I guess you're not cut out for it. There's that undertone of, oh, you must be weak. Yeah. Yeah. Or, if the venture capital firms or people in the space have been entrepreneurs, they might be more empathetic, where like, I've been there. That's really hard. Yeah. But in spite of that, you still have to deliver. Right. There's a yes, and you still have to show up and find, Right. So and I walked into this current role at a startup because of a situation like this. And there's always a switching cost, for the original founder, and it's tough. Yeah. So I would say that going into the venture capital world and being in that world, there's going to be no margin given. And you have to accept that part of your job is to ensure, at least from a perception perspective, that you have your stuff together, that you're stable, that, your house is in order and the company is fine. Right. And there is a lot of a song and dance around that. For me, part of my move from Orange County, which for me, I got personally very caught up at times in that hustle culture where you have people who have like 3-4 jobs because it's like never enough. Or there's a lot of shame associated with how you look, or a lot of shame with where you live. Moving to a city of 1.2 million people, like where I live in Richmond, was partly for my own mental well-being. The cost of living is half, and it makes it, which is good for my kids when they leave the house in the future. And I live in a magical forest full of all sorts of squirrels and birds, and and I live close to the James River, which is beautiful, and I'm 2 hours from the ocean and 2 hours from mountains and 2 hours from beautiful vineyards. And part of that was to move to a place where all the great things about where I live are accessible to me, whereas before they were not. either because of time and the need to feel like I have to work 80 hours a week, or just the cost or the crowdedness. So for me, and I'm not trying to be critical of having lived where you currently live.
Right. No, not at all. It's just different.
It's just a lot easier for me to live where I live now and focus on and be in a good headspace for my career. So I think that's a big part of it, is making sure my environment is what I need personally to thrive. And then I think that switch from, really focusing on the people has been really foundational for my own health and mental well-being. I'm happiest when I'm creating. You're making a podcast. I think that you Keith, and probably Brandon as well, we both have this desire to create things, put things out in the world.
Yeah, for sure.
So I always have, multiple projects that I'm invested in and learning. So for me, like knowing what makes me happy, what fills me up, where I want to live, who I value, that all is very, it's pretty foundational to keeping my head on straight.
Yeah. That's good.
Hmm.
And then
I wish I had a better, I wish I could tell you, hey, I'm, I really do have a meditation practice, but I don't.
Sure.
I can't sit still very long. And I wish I could tell you, like, I have, I do a time where I read every day, but I have a trouble paying attention to books now.
Yeah.
So trying to figure out like what for me helps get me in a good place.
Right.
A lot of it's environmental.
Well, that's huge. I mean, people don't think about that. I feel like a lot of this meditation stuff, it's like if you're living in hellish, unnatural New York City, you need to be meditating all the time. But if you're hanging out in the forest, I mean, you might not need to detox from all that psychic energy when you're already in a nice, healthy environment.
Yep.
But, so this is a question I have, maybe to kind of back up. What makes a great video game?
Ooh.
So I think this is, for me, it is about games that respect the player's decisions and expression. If you think about Minecraft, which on the surface is a pretty ugly game compared to the latest God of War game or Call of Duty game. But that game is Legos. It allows endless expression. There are systems that you can play with on or off. You can cater the experience to yourself. And every action in the game has some sort of response. The world tells me about it. So I love games that respect my choices and give me feedback. Oh, I know that you did this thing, or you want to do this thing, and we've allowed for it to happen. I watched an interview recently with the director of the Elder Scrolls series and Fallout series.
Like the Skyrim, right?
Yeah, exactly. Todd Howard. And he talks a lot about, like, they spend a lot of time playtesting and figuring out what do players want to try and do. And so much of their energy is allowing it to happen. And even if it's weird, like putting in quest line, like there's a game called Fable, and in Fable 2, if you like take all your clothes off and you run around in your underwear, the little villagers will be like, oh, he's taking his clothes off. What is he doing? He's crazy. They start reacting to you. And you're like, put some clothes on. They're like, they respond to you, versus like pretending like nothing weird is happening. So that they saw people trying to run around in their underwear in the game, and they thought, okay, well, we're going to write some dialogue and some animations where they're like pointing at you and they're like recognizing what you're doing in the game and that it's socially deviant. And I think like that is the magic of video games. It's this emergence. And the interesting thing about Skyrim is that it doesn't run at 60 frames a second. It runs at 30 frames a second because they devote the extra processing power to run a world simulation of every character in the game all the time. So while you're playing the game, you don't see it, but like the the characters have routines, they have needs, they have jobs they do all during the day, they have places they go, they have relationships. They'll have, they'll battle each other, they'll fight. And you'll come upon these characters in the midst of their routine. And there are so many systems about how they interact with each other and what could or could not happen. And there's a randomization factor in their simulation that you can stumble upon situations that were never planned for happening in this world that you feel like, oh, this is my story that's unique to me. So I think that's what makes a great video game, is that allowance for the unexpected and the personalized. I recognize the craftsmanship of a very story-heavy game like God of War or The Last of Us.
Yeah, The Last of Us was the huge one. All my movie friends were like, "This is better than any movie." Yeah, that was the big one a couple years ago.
But I can't.
What was the deal with that?
It was a zombie game. I never actually played it, but it was just this really tragic storyline about this guy taking this little girl, and people were just honestly talked about the storyline more than the gameplay, which I thought was interesting. Right.
That's exactly my point. Yeah. So I mean, the writing, the voice acting is extraordinary. The performances are incredible. And by the way, the TV show The Last of Us comes out in January.
Oh, awesome. There you go.
You should check it out. I think it'll be a better TV show than a video game, personally. I think for me, it's like, why does this have to be a video game? If it's just me fighting and then I watch cutscenes, I would rather just skip the fighting and just watch the cutscenes. Yeah,
just make it a movie.
I'd rather just be a movie. And so for me, it's about what is the relationship of me respecting what the player's trying to do and me allowing it. Even if it's a more linear experience, like give me puzzles that I can solve a couple different ways, or that will really engage my brain and make it all about puzzles, if that's what the game's about. So I think that, linear cutscene movie style animation has always been a vehicle for the fact that we were technically limited in telling compelling stories in engine, but we have hurdled that now. And I'd rather be spending as much time as possible letting players do, rather than just showing them.
Yeah, because I feel like the cutscene heavy stuff, it is sort of like a puzzle with one solution to the next, right? It's not, like you said, you don't get to get as involved or...
But, some of the best stuff in video games also is just social. Like me and my friends doing something, or me and I actually had a bit of a crisis before COVID about, like, is working in video games good for the world? Like, is it important? Does it matter? And then when COVID hit and so many people were playing Animal Crossing and like going to each other's islands or hanging out in World of Warcraft because they couldn't be together in real life. Families in virtual worlds where otherwise they couldn't be together, but they were together in Azeroth running around World of Warcraft or in Final Fantasy Online, or like, for me, I realized how important and how vital those social relationships are, and how this avenue has really connected people more deeply, and provided new ways, especially for people who are more introverted, to have deep, meaningful relationships and purpose. Like, let's say somebody is a guild leader in World of Warcraft, and they have a guild with 500 people, and they are vital for running that guild and organizing events and leading play and inviting new people. And they spend, let's say, 50 hours a week on their own time doing that. Is that any less valuable than, providing community in another environment for 500 people? It may be World of Warcraft, but it still means so much to those people. Right. I came out of COVID just really on fire again for gaming and what I do.
And also people are pretty they're on their phones in real life anyway. It's not like back in the day. It's like, I feel like, you know what I mean? It's like you try and hang out with someone in real life, and it's actually more on the internet than if you were to just like be zooming and forgetting that you're even using a computer actually.
The alternative that we're taking endless selfies and on our phones looking at Instagram while we're together.
Yeah, it's the virtual and then we can be dressed like orcs. That's cooler.
Yeah,
you're a wizard.
It's true. You can do that in real life too, I guess. But
we're almost there.
Yeah.
If someone, you got started really before it was even cool, or, there's always this, every year I feel like they say it's like, oh, it's peaked, programming is peaked. But if someone were to, hear this podcast or want to have an idea for a video game and want to get into it right now, what's the best way for you to see someone getting involved, or school, or get straight to work, or start developing? Yeah. Where's the best starting point these days?
Well, the great news is that there's a lot of formal ways to do it now. There are lots of programs. You just need to Google it. You'll find them everywhere. State schools now have game development education programs. I think there's no better degree than a computer science degree. Just learning a program will give you all the options, and you should just do that if you can. Or get, really focused on like being an art student and doing fine art and just being a great artist, because all the other tools can be learned. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you need a portfolio that's, can demonstrate that you're useful to a game team. So, and this is, I'm talking about development for a second. There's other ways to do it, but let's talk about development. There's so many ways between the Unreal Engine and the Unity engine to go make content, to volunteer to be part of an indie game project online. So many ways to just volunteer your time to learn, to be on a team, to ship something, to put on your resume. That's the best way to do it. It's just to do it. Don't worry about being paid. Just learn and grow. Now there are all these other new, some are new, some are not. Marketing, branding, social media, community managers, product managers, office admins, administrative assistants. There's a lot of roles that people do today that they can do in video gaming. So if you have a skill set that is used at a major publisher like EA or Activision today, and you can just go into that industry first in whatever you do today, that's probably the best way to go. You don't have to be a video game developer to be in the video game industry.
Got it.
Lawyer, there's a lot of lawyers and accountants. We had multiple accountants at my last company. So there's a lot of people have a skill set to work in the gaming industry, just maybe not in development.
Yeah, I see actually more jobs for, I'm a video editor for like the last 10 years. I see honestly more jobs for video game companies than almost anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sadly, I don't have I'm not a big gamer myself, so that usually I get so there's always somebody that plays games way more than me who also edits, sadly. Mm-hmm. But that's but yeah, no, it's a very fascinating industry. I just like, it's like you said, it's not going anywhere. It's just going to get crazier and crazier. And it seems like that's not a lot of industries. Like I said, I came from the film industry, and those are getting changed. And I wouldn't always say for the better. It's like Netflix and all the streaming stuff is cool, but I would argue that people care about the content a little less. And it's just, I feel like just the industry itself is we don't have to get into that.
I think that's fine. My sister works in the film. She's a stat photographer.
Oh, nice.
Works on a bunch of stuff in New Orleans right now. And I think like there's a very clear career paths and very clear rigid structure in the film industry that can be pretty reassuring, but also pretty constraining, I think, once you get into it. And there's always that danger when you do, one of the things that is unique in video games is there's this very fast tech innovation and advancement arc that's happening. So there's always new things to learn. There's always new hardware. There's always new tech. And it's not like every time you have to edit a project, you have to learn a new editor.
Right. Yeah. Or like a new set of VFX. Yeah. It's not, you're actually getting better at using the old stuff more than using some new skill usually.
Exactly. And so I think that sometimes can also lead to some complacency or disenchantment with the craft or the industry.
Yeah.
And I think that when you're not growing, like we see this in music right now, its growth is not actually in the making of the music. It's in more ways to monetize. Let's sell NFTs. Let's expand the streaming service. Like it's maybe interesting to people at the business leadership level, but the actual reality for a music artist is it's getting harder to tour. You're making less money. Yeah. It's a tough path. And so I think that can create a sense of, can make it a harder industry overall to operate in, where it all becomes about just numbers and money and
Right.
Because there's a sense that, there's a scarcity around the mindset. So I think in gaming, we're not there yet. It's just, there's too much opportunity. There's too much growth. There's plenty for everybody. So it creates it's a really great space to be in general at the moment.
Very cool. I think, thanks for chatting with us, man. It's really fascinating. It's like I've never really talked to anyone in the gaming industry. So it's just such a, it's very parallel to the entertainment industry. And I've never really met anyone who, it seems like, it's a cool, but I feel like you guys also have the advantage that it is sort of right-brained and left-brained, right? Like the programming makes it so left-brained, left-brained. And then the creativity aspect is, because, filmmaking, art tends to be more on the creative end. I would say, but
yeah, I think it is unique in that way. I would say that having also worked at times outside of the gaming industry is so smart. Everyone, right or left brained, are so smart.
Yeah.
And it's incredible to work with such intelligent, innovative, creative people just day in, day out. But yeah, there is this interesting that when you're directing a game, you're bridging the the like right brain of like, let's be innovative, let's break new ground, and the left brain of engineers like, well, I don't know if we could actually do that. I think
or we could, but it'll take 90 hours in a row. Yeah.
I'm gonna need 6 more engineers and like, well, what if we change it like this? Can we, there's a lot of negotiation between the different disciplines and a lot of collaboration and discussion, but honestly the best engineers are the ones who are masters of their craft in engineering, but can like take a right-brained idea and say, I get what you're trying to get at. What if we solved it like this? And then the artist sees it, or the animator, and says, that's amazing, I love it, let's do that. So there are people, the best people in the industry can do both.
Got it.
Patrick, what have we not talked about that we ought to still hit with you?
I'm surprised we talked about Survivor. I mean, at that point, I feel we've crossed the gamut. It's been I feel like I've talked a lot. My hope is always to bring value to your listeners, and and hopefully there's some lessons in there. I try to be very sincere in what I cover. But yeah, it's been such a pleasure talking to you, and I thank you for doing this podcast. It's, you need to do 100 of these to really
right.
get traction. So.
Exactly.
I appreciate the commitment.
Well, for sure. I mean, that better than, we're trying to model being relentless. At 10, I'm going, okay, wait, what are we doing? And why are we doing it? And how do we need to tweak it? And we're like, let's just keep doing it. We're having fun, right? Yeah, we're enjoying the conversation. I was like, okay, but and I wanted to try to drill down to make sure we were getting it just right. And we're like, well, it'll as we keep doing it, it will. But we just got to keep doing them.
Yeah, so, I think that's true. I think be persistent. Your message will get out, and your audience will grow, and people will find it. Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, thanks for listening, by the way. That really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's neat that you've listened to our podcast, and that was cool, and that means a lot. I know you care about me and my family and what I'm up to, and that I just likewise for you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, we want to have you back when we keep getting further down the road, and you've got some new news and other cool things you can share. We want to just circle back and revisit it.
Let's do it. That'd be amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, because I want to talk more about IA. I listen to Sam Harris, who's really smart and brings in really smart people. And they're talking about where's the future of IA, or AI. Yeah. Sorry, see, I don't even know how to say it right. AI.
That's the next version.
Right, IA. Ooh, right, intelligent. And then just even for you as a parent with and technology and raising kids, so that could be something interesting to talk about. And then we didn't talk much more about where your spiritual journey is. So, will you come back?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, my friend.
Anywhere people can connect with
you,
or
if
is that
people
sort of show up in the lobby of your office and wait around with the resume?
So I'm going to be honest. I quit Facebook and Twitter, and I've purged myself. And so I I want to be available, but it
Yeah.
has not gone well. So
There you go.
unfortunately
They'll just
don't have anything to plug.
Right. That's okay. They'll just have to keep bugging us to try to get hold of you, and we'll just we'll say he's on Survivor filming.
Yeah, exactly. He's on the island, folks.
He's on set somewhere.
I appreciate it.
And dude, I look forward to seeing you on Survivor.
Yeah,
I know it's going to happen.
Thank you.
All right,
That's
dude.
so kind.
Thanks,
All right.
Patrick.
All right, take care.
All right,
See ya.
take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
As always, the Kindness Rising podcast is brought to you by Kindness Rising. Kindness Rising is a community organization committed to inspiring, equipping, and resourcing people to lead lives that flourish, grounded in kindness, and aimed at making the world a better place. For more information, please visit our website at kindnessrising.community. There you can find out about our upcoming events, how to get involved. You can sign up for our newsletter, find out more information about this podcast, or even donate. Kindness Rising is supported solely by the generous contribution of our lovely donors. So if you would like to help support us, please go to kindnessrising.community/donate.